It began like any normal patrol. Just after noon, officers received a call about a suspicious man sitting alone on a park bench near a children's playground. He wasn't causing trouble, just sitting quietly, holding an old duffel bag and staring at the grass. But something about him felt off. His clothes were worn and his expression was distant. Parents nearby grew uneasy, and officers approached with caution. When asked to stand, the elderly man struggled, wincing in pain. "I'm just resting," he said softly. But the officers remained wary. Another unit with a K-9 was soon called in for backup. Minutes after the initial officers arrived, a patrol SUV pulled up with a K-9 unit inside. The back door opened, and out stepped a powerful German Shepherd, alert, focused, ready for command. The elderly man raised his hands slowly, trying to calm the situation, but the officers were tense. One shouted sharply, "Show us what's in the bag." The man trembled but couldn't speak. Children were hurried away from the swings. Another officer placed a hand on his holster, and one radioed for further assistance. The K-9 officer, tall and stern, held Shadow's leash tightly. "Last warning? Sir, comply now," he barked. The man hesitated, not in defiance, but in fear. That's when the command came, "K-9, go get him." Shadow lunged forward, muscles coiled, eyes locked. He was a blur of motion. Gasps erupted from onlookers. But then something unbelievable happened. The dog didn't bite. Just feet away from the man, he stopped abruptly. He let out a low whimper instead of a growl. Ears perked, head tilted. He sniffed the air. Something was different. The man whispered one word, "Shadow," and the dog froze. The aggression faded. His tail lowered. This wasn't hesitation. It was recognition. The K-9 knew this man. When the old man whispered, "Shadow," something inside the dog shifted. Shadow, trained for obedience and control, didn't growl or lunge. He let out a long, aching whine and lowered his head. The man's voice cracked as he said, "It's me. It's Frank." Shadow took a cautious step forward, sniffed the man's coat, then gently pressed his head into Frank's trembling hands. A stunned silence fell over the park. Officers stood frozen, unsure what they were witnessing. This wasn't just a well-trained dog recognizing a command. It was a memory awakening. Moments later, dispatch confirmed the truth. Franklin Ward, a retired military K-9 handler, had been presumed dead after a bombing overseas 6 years ago. He'd suffered a traumatic brain injury, lost his ID, and slipped through the cracks, homeless, forgotten. Shadow had survived separately and been reassigned to law enforcement, his past erased. But in this quiet park, surrounded by suspicion, training faded and love remained. Shadow had found the only person who ever truly meant home. Frank wept openly, holding his long-lost companion close, whispering, "They told me you didn't make it." But Shadow remembered. Not for a second had he forgotten. And now neither would anyone else. As the two sat on the grass, Frank weathered and weeping, Shadow curled gently against him. Time seemed to stop. Officers slowly lowered their weapons, realizing they weren't witnessing a threat, but a reunion, years in the making. Flashbacks swept through Frank's mind, late-night patrols under desert stars, whispered commands, Shadow sleeping beside him in war-torn bunkers. He remembered shielding the dog from shrapnel, calling his name in the chaos before everything went dark. Shadow remembered too. He licked Frank's shaking hands and let out a soft exhale, like a soldier finally safe. By now a crowd had gathered. Parents, joggers, even shopkeepers stood in silence. Phones were raised, capturing the miracle unfolding before them. A little boy whispered, That dog remembers him. Tears welled in the eyes of strangers. The canine officer who still held the leash loosely finally let go. "He's not my dog," he said quietly. "Not anymore." Within hours, the footage had gone viral. Headlines read, "Canine dog reunites with long-lost handler, an emotional park scene." It wasn't just a story of disobedience. It was about memory loyalty and a bond that wartime and even the system couldn't erase. Shadow had chosen love over command, and the world watched in awe. Later that same day, city officials, supervisors, and even the K9 coordinator arrived at the park. Though protocol dictated that Shadow was still an active duty police dog, what had just happened left everyone questioning what truly mattered. As Frank sat on a blanket brought by a kind stranger cradling Shadow's head in his lap, a commanding officer knelt beside them. "Frank," his voice trembling, asked, "You're not taking him away, are you?" The officer shook his head gently. "No, sir. We're bringing him home." Cheers erupted from the small crowd gathered nearby. Shadow wagged his tail slowly as if he understood. For once, policy bowed to compassion. In the days that followed, Frank and Shadow were moved into a quiet, veterans-assisted living community on the edge of town. It wasn't luxurious, but it was peaceful with warm meals, daily care, and a small yard for Shadow to roam. For the first time in years, Frank received proper medical treatment. Shadow got a new collar engraved, not with a badge, but with his real name. Together they rested better than they had in years. They were no longer a forgotten man and a government-trained dog. They were family. Two souls, finally home again. Weeks passed and Frank and Shadow became cherished members of their new community. The staff adored them, Frank with his quiet strength and Shadow with his calm, watchful presence. Children from the neighborhood often stopped by, bringing treats and drawing pictures of the brave dog who never forgot. Veterans living in the home began to open up to sharing stories they hadn't spoken aloud in decades, inspired by the bond between the old handler and his loyal companion. For the first time in years, Frank wasn't called homeless or forgotten. He was called a hero. Shadow wasn't seen as a dangerous K9, but a symbol of unwavering love. They spent slow mornings walking the yard together, afternoons sitting in the sun, and evenings falling asleep side by side, just like old times. And though neither asked for attention, their story continued to spread. People across the country saw in them something rare, a loyalty unbroken by time, war, or distance. They were no longer just a man and his dog. They were a reminder of what truly matters. Not orders or rank, but love, memory, and the quiet power of never letting go. They didn't find their way home through protocol. They did it through heart. In a world that often rushes past the forgotten and the broken, this story reminds us of something timeless love never forgets. The bond between Frank, an elderly veteran, and his K9 partner Shadow shows us that true connection goes beyond time, memory, or even trauma. Shadow didn't respond to a command. He responded to a feeling, a memory rooted in love. For older adults, especially those who have experienced loss or loneliness, this story is a powerful reminder. Even when the world moves on, the heart remembers. Whether it's a dog remembering its handler or a person holding on to a loved one's smile, those bonds shape us. It also speaks to the need for compassion in policy, for choosing people over procedure. Frank found dignity, not through a system, but through those who chose kindness. We all age, and we all hope that in our later years, someone sees us, not for what we've lost, but for what we still carry: wisdom, love, and the memories that define us. This story is not just about a dog and his handler. It's about home healing and the quiet hope that it's never too late to be remembered or to be reunited with the ones who truly matter.